Hello and welcome to yet another Geek Show where this movie is absolutely my tempo. I'm your host, Alton Munnell.
And I'm your host, Alex Ecker.
Could you sound more awake for me, Alex?
Sorry, you seem like you're rushing, and I seem like I'm dragging.
All right, fair enough. All right, I made you watch this movie several years ago.
Uh-huh.
A couple years later, I made you watch La La Land, and now we do this dumb movie podcast, and we're just gonna watch all the Damien Chazelle movies. So,
it's stupid. The fuck are you talking about?
It's a real bad show.
It's really...
That said, how did your, I assume, second viewing go?
I think I like it less.
Really?
Yeah, it's weird.
Okay.
Like don't get me wrong, like I thoroughly enjoy the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like I thoroughly enjoy the movie. And for me, it gets better in the back half of the movie.
Sure.
Man, it's... I don't know if it's... Maybe the direction. Because, like, obviously this guy's not a drummer. I'm not a drummer, really. Like...
Who are you referring to with this guy?
The main guy. Oh, shit, what was his name?
The actor.
Miles Teller?
Miles Teller.
Yeah.
Yeah, he
did learn how to play for this movie, but...
Yeah, he obviously doesn't play everything we hear, and he kind of, even when you're getting a good shot of him, you can only tell if you're really looking for it, but he's kind of just doing a decent job miming it and not quite getting it. It's close enough to never pull me out, but he learned...
It's close enough to pull me out.
He learned enough to mostly pull it off, but what are you going to do when you're trying to make a movie about, you know, potentially the greatest drummer on earth, and then, you know, you can't find someone who is
right.
that and a great actor.
Right. No, I
this is kind
agree.
of the best you can get is faking it close, you know, just as close as you can.
Yeah, no, I'll give you that. Now, for those of you who decided to stumble on this episode of the podcast, before we really get into it, there's going to be spoilers ahead for this movie, and if you haven't seen this movie, go fucking watch it right now. I don't care how. Go watch it and then come back and listen to our opinions, because our opinions are important and matter. Did that sound convincing at all? I really hope not. No, this movie starts off with a dude playing drums, and then you get the fucking yellow M&M that comes out. J.K. Simmons, who's honestly the best part of this movie.
For sure.
He's the best part of this movie in the worst way.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's playing an extraordinarily unlikable character. Think the sergeant from Full Metal Jacket. That's who this is.
Yeah. He wants to see her war face and thinks that you can suck a golf ball through a garden hose.
Absolutely.
It's bad.
Damien Chazelle says that while he was playing drums in college, like there is... Obviously, this is an extreme exaggeration of what any real world band director can get away with, but he did say this is influenced by his real life, that he had a band director that was this terrible and awful, and that, you know, he would repeatedly think about it long after finishing. And yeah, I mean, it's not absurd to the point that, like, oh, he kills someone and gets to keep teaching. It's not so far into fantasy. It's a little over the edge. It's just a little movie skeptical. And he does get fired at the end, to be fair, but still, like, day one, introduction to this character.
You're referring
not
to...
his very first scene, but J.K. Simmons, but very early on, he's pushing limits where you're like, no, there's no way a school would be letting him get away with this.
You would be amazed, dude. You would genuinely be amazed. Like, for example, my dad, he was in choir and band in the 80s, and his teacher, for example, actually picked him up and threw him against a wall for not doing his best. You know, maybe this was a little more accurate in a previous time era. Set in a modern day thing.
This would be more believable if it wasn't taking place today.
Right. You know,
absolutely.
Yeah, so I mean, I could totally see this being something that you get away with in like the 70s, 80s, because people were just a lot more aggressive back then. And even now, I could see this realistically still being a case of like, you know, choir director gets mad, throws a fucking chair at the drummer's head, screams that it's not his tempo. Maybe not this extreme, but back then, absolutely.
I mean, today, the yelling's realistic, the swearing's realistic, the homophobia is not realistic, and the chair throwing is not realistic. Not without him getting fired the next day.
Right.
In any case, I don't want to spend too long on the realism. I'm just saying it skirts a little bit plausibility, but not so much that I'm like, no, I don't buy it. It still
just
works.
Not entirely probable.
Just the right amount of ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah, certainly. So like I was saying in the beginning, you get a kid playing drums, and then the yellow M&M man comes in, and like he's very weird, and you can tell that right off the get-go. Like he's very like direct to the point, kind of a dick about it, and the main character really doesn't know how to take him. Then eventually he gets into this jazz band who J.K. Simmons directs, and he's a complete asshole. He builds J.K. Simmons' character. He kind of builds people up and then tears them right the fuck back down in a very, very aggressive way. In fact, I remember the first time watching this movie with you, and you even, like, you and I both were like kind of like ducking into ourselves into the couch because like we thought we were being yelled at, and it was super aggressive. J.K. Simmons does a fantastic angry man, and he's also a good actor. No, just kidding. Man.
So he kind of has to be this ridiculous to work alongside the main character, Andrew Neiman, because Andrew's goal is a ridiculous one that we don't really have today, where today as a musician, if you care about, nobody today is trying to be the greatest musician in the world.
No,
because it's unrealistic. It's a ridiculous goal. You want to be your best, and if you might care about your technical skill. If you're in jazz band, you certainly care heavily about your technical skill. You might even set out to be a rock star, but nobody is setting out to be the greatest drummer that ever lived.
No.
And that's kind of just the internet, because that rock star, I don't want to use the word rock star because he's a jazz drummer, whatever, that person doesn't really exist today because there's so much competition with the internet that there are guitarists that in the 70s and 80s we would have considered the greats, and we consider them legends now, and I'm not going to drop names, but today you can throw a 70s legend at me and I'll say, but what about these 500 basement guitarists on YouTube that are playing circles around him?
There's never going to be another guitar legend ever.
And then past, I don't use the term derogatively, but even past just like basement musicians like me, even with bands that are actually out there and performing and making it, there are so many of them.
Right. Yeah. Honestly, it's even harder to get into the music business now, I'd say, as a kind of like a side rant from the movie.
Somehow more and less, because anyone can go, it's easier in that anyone can do it. Anyone can buy a little bit of equipment and learn what they're doing off the internet. But it's also harder because everyone else can do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
With Andrew having this ridiculous, unrealistic goal, if we want to portray that goal on film anyway, I guess the instructor inspiring him and tormenting him has to be similarly ridiculous to pull it off.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll give you that. I'll tell you what. I like jazz, actually. I'm not a guy that hates it. It's one of those things where if it comes on, I'm like, ooh, this is nice. I dig this.
Yeah.
Every now and again, I will actively seek it depending on my mood.
Sure.
I don't think I like the style of jazz in this movie without the context of the movie. There's a lot of it that I like.
Sure.
It's really good, but it's just something I don't think I would exactly seek out. I'm not like true cult about jazz. You know what I mean? The music in this movie is phenomenal. It's arranged very well. I really liked the style of showing bits and pieces of the whole like final act of the movie like of them rehearsing it, and then we finally get to hear it in the end.
Sure, I hear you.
But yeah, I don't know. I really love the music, but this isn't something I'd actively seek out and go, ooh, I want to hear the Whiplash soundtrack.
I'm similar. Jazz is something I'll look up once every few months and be into it for a day and never truly learn to understand it and appreciate it properly. But if you put it on, I'm going to nod my head and be thankful for it. That said, I'm going to illustrate how little I know about jazz and say that I don't actually know how much of the music in this movie is written for it and how much of it really is a jazz standard.
Right.
They keep using that phrase, jazz standard, but is Caravan really a jazz standard, or is it written for this movie? There's what I know about jazz. I don't know.
Whiplash was totally written for this movie, right?
I have to assume.
Yeah.
I have to assume, but not know for sure. Yeah. And that said, I've never hunted out the soundtrack or the score for this movie afterwards. I've watched this movie 5 or 6 times, but yeah, I've never felt the need to look up the music afterwards. I've looked up La La Land after the fact and listened to the soundtrack on Spotify several times over. But yeah, not this one.
Yeah, it's good inside the movie. Definitely.
That said, because of the context of the film, we're getting music that's really heavily drum focused. It's all about showing off the drummers, and I don't think many people do. I don't really hunt out music where it's the drummers the focus. Drummers tend to, you'll get a solo here and there, you'll get a good moment to show off here and there, but the drummer is really about knowing as tastefully as possible how to support everyone else.
Yeah.
And so I'm never really going to hunt out music where the drummer specifically is the highlight. Yeah, I'll appreciate a great drummer, but it's going to be Rush, and he's going to be sitting behind a great bassist and a great guitarist.
Fair enough. Man, the acting is really good in this movie. But
stellar.
I don't know if it's certain things from the director kind of giving certain inspirations. Some of it felt a little forced the second time through. Like the breakup scene between our main character and the girlfriend, like it kind of felt forced.
In what way? In a narrative way? In the way the lines are delivered way?
The lines were delivered okay, but chronologically, like in the series of events in the movie, like it just felt a little too forced for the story.
The whole relationship doesn't really need to be there. The whole relationship kind of feels like a way to add an extra 10 minutes to the movie.
Yeah.
It serves the purpose of illustrating Andrew's current mental state anyway. Meaning, once he's excited and stoked about getting into this band and getting some attention, he comes out of his shell and wants to ask a girl out, which is something it's implied he wouldn't normally do.
Yeah.
And then that inspiration to be the best gets ratcheted up another 10 notches. And then he realizes, no, I have one singular goal. I have the ability to come out of my shell and date people, but it's not what I need right now.
Right. Yeah. It's something that he feels will destroy his dream of becoming a drummer.
Yeah.
Well, the greatest drummer.
So it serves that purpose, but yeah, it still doesn't quite feel necessary. This I put in the Blu-ray to watch this yesterday, and I went in the special features, and I discovered that this was made as a short film first. There's like a 20-minute version of the movie, and I don't know if that version was made first to get funding for this, or if that was his original full vision, and then when he realized he could make a whole movie out of it, he needed to stretch it to full length. I don't know which one's the case. That 20-minute short film, I don't actually really recommend seeking it out, because it's actually just a scene or two out of the movie, word for word, still with J.K. Simmons.
Oh, wow.
Just on a different set with other different actors. And, I assumed that a lot of J.K. Simmons' dialogue was ad-libbed, but it's all word for word when you watch the short film.
Really?
Afterwards. Yeah, it's bizarre how precisely scripted it is.
Oh, man. Like, I'm kind of a little bummed out knowing that now.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, it just felt like, I mean, sure, don't get me wrong, scripted or not, the delivery is what counts.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of feel like the aggression was part of it's kind of a sick and twisted way to be relatable.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we all know that guy,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And if it were improv, I kind of feel like it would be a little more respectable. Not saying that it isn't.
But if you couldn't tell anyway that there wasn't any ad lib, then
I'm conflicted.
Then he still got his point across.
Yeah, I'm conflicted on how I feel knowing that it's still scripted.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm gonna try my best to not let it ruin my dream of becoming the best drummer.
It doesn't make those scenes worse. It just makes you wonder, oh, could he have added more to it then if he had room to ad lib?
Yeah.
It's not worse after the fact. It's just, could it have been better if he had some leeway to play with?
Maybe that's what I'm trying to toss around here.
Yeah. That said, Damien Chazelle, the writer/director, he is a guy with a really precise vision.
Mm-hmm.
He shoots exactly what he wants. He's a director that you can tell every little thing he's doing is exactly on purpose. He's never just pointing a camera somewhere because he needs to. No one's ever just saying something because someone needs to be saying something.
Mm-hmm.
And this watching the short film and seeing basically the exact same movie with different actors minus Simmons.
Mm-hmm.
Just goes to illustrate that. But down to the directing of the drumming, which is the biggest thing he really needed to get right. And honestly, until this time watching it, and I've watched it several times, I never used to be able to tell how much of it was faked. I assumed some of it was off, but the benefit here is that jazz drumming is so incredibly complicated that even as a musician, not knowing jazz drums, it's still hard for me to tell when I'm looking for it. If he were playing metal, I would have been able to easily tell, no, he's not playing what I'm hearing.
Right.
But jazz drumming can get so much more complicated and sophisticated than most metal drummers that I'm like, I don't know, I'm hearing a barrage of notes and I'm seeing a barrage of notes. It works for me. So that said, it had to be hard to figure out how to, like, even if you could tell right away, it had to be hard to figure out how to sell it as well as they did. And convincingness aside, have you ever really seen a musician in a movie get directed this well to illustrate this much intensity through playing an instrument? Just a matter of getting the right camera angles and catching the right faces on the musician and writing the right music parts to get the point across.
Yeah. I know, like, maybe it's I'm just being overly hard, but like I definitely noticed quite a few spots my second time through that the drumming was definitely falling through and not working. And maybe because my second time through I was just paying more attention because I really do like this movie. But like certain details that just didn't make sense to me, like towards the end, when he's playing and J.K. Simmons is kind of like hushing him back down to lower the tempo. And like they show that slow-mo shot of the cymbal. Yeah. Why the fuck was it wet?
The exact shot you have in mind's not coming back to me. Was it more than could be implied to just be sweat?
Yeah, like it was like the whole thing was like encumbered in water droplets. And like it's like the small details that like I don't know, maybe I'm just really nitpicking here.
I assume they just wanted us to interpret that as a ridiculous amount of sweat given how much blood is also in this movie. That's not a normal, typical part of drumming.
No, don't get me wrong. There's quite a bit of blood in drumming. If you ever bust your fingers off the rim of a snare, it's not fun.
It's not normally like this, though.
I've never had blisters that bleed like that. And
it's I believe that musicians can fight their way through this kind of intense pain because I know that say one of the guitarists from Dillinger Escape Plan has broken his fingers and then still decided to go on stage and play Dillinger Escape Plan music. So with that being real,
I remember slicing my fingers open and then getting them glued together or glued shut and then going and doing an open mic night.
Yeah, so I can believe that there are people that will fight through the extent of injuries seen in this. Well, I don't know about the car crash. Granted,
Yeah.
he failed. He came out and he played for a minute and then just totally lost the drill.
And then he got incredibly hungry and attacked the yellow M&M.
Yeah, and I'm actually relieved, because after the car crash and him running back in, I'm like, you are not about to show me him playing the greatest drum solo on earth after a car crash. And so I was relieved they didn't go that way.
I'll tell you what, though, they really kind of foreshadowed it with what was the one musician? Because like there's a scene where he thinks he's not going to get the part, and he walks in. Fletcher, which is J.K. Simmons' character, he walks in and the dude's like in tears, and he just tells him to leave him the fuck alone. If he wants the part, he has to earn it. And then like the next scene, you see Fletcher. He's showing off this musician kid who apparently died in a car crash. Who well, you later find out after the car crash scene didn't. But like as soon as the car got involved, like even like the second time watching, I forgot when it happened. And I thought it was on the way to the show and not going back to get his sticks and then back to the show.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh shit, he dodged the bullet. Why do I remember there being a car crash? And then he leaves, and then I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah. My wife was watching this for the second time, first time being years ago, and yeah, she forgot about the car crash and was startled and jumped all over again. And just another example that really came to mind, because it really caught my attention while watching it, of the director having to do something really precise and intentional in directing the drum playing, where there's a particular moment where Andrew seems to be doing well, and he makes one mistake, causes Fletcher to lash out. But when he makes that mistake, he's playing a really complicated piece, and he doesn't lose the tempo, he doesn't lose the meter. There's not other musicians playing similarly complicated things that he can throw off guard, but he just misplaces one note. And I don't know what the director did to make it so obvious, but you can tell he made the mistake before Fletcher lashes out. And I don't really know what the giveaway was, because he was still in time, but it was just the way he shot it, you could tell, oh, that note wasn't supposed to be there.
Yeah.
And it's like, how did you know? Like, we don't have that drum part learned. We don't actually know how that goes.
Maybe it's just like
we've
we could
played
kind of
live and we've had people like give us the advice live that it doesn't matter that you messed up. No one else knows you did it.
Right.
How did we know here?
Maybe it was the what's the word? Is it timbre?
Maybe it's an audio thing. Yeah, maybe the audio design did something there that made it sound out of place.
Like if it was like a snare hit, it would have been more of a instead of a doof, you know?
Yeah, it could have been something like that. And I mean, I know that the shot like zoomed in on it, but that's not really enough because it zooms in on drums all over the place. So yeah, maybe it was an audio thing.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of subtle things like in the opening scene when you're first in Fletcher's class and he's like freaking out trying to figure out who's not in tune. I was really listening to see if somebody was out of tune, and it is the like absolute slightest noise. Like you can hear the wave just like you know what I mean?
Yeah, I did hear it.
And he's like, oh nope, it's here. And I thought it was it was just really funny when he asked if the dude was out of tune, and he's like, do you know if you're out of tune? And he says yes, and then he leaves, and he's like, by the way, I knew it was you, and points to the other kid, and he's like, if that stupid ass can't figure out that he's not in tune, that's even worse.
Yeah, it's
oh man,
it's good stuff. He has a particular unique way of messing with people. Do I look like a double fucking rainbow to you might be my favorite shit talking line of dialogue I've ever heard.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. Man,
does this inspire you more or less to be a great musician?
It sure as shit doesn't make me want to be a jazz player. Especially a drummer.
I remember when we watched this together years ago after the fact, being like, I don't think that inspired me to play more.
Yeah,
That's not usually how these movies go. You
And
don't
it's-
watch Drumline and go, I want nothing to do with music anymore.
Right. It's super funny because I'm sure we can talk about Limit Break. And,
Sure.
And I did a bunch of work on our Limit Break stuff before watching that movie because I didn't know if it was going to make me feel like a piece of shit musician or not.
It does make me feel like I'm not pushing myself nearly hard enough, even though I don't desire to be one of the greats.
There's
It's a
certain...
big relief off your shoulders to just want to be a guy that writes decent music, not a guy that wants to be the top of the world.
Right.
If that's what you want to be, more power to you, but you're not going to make it. That's not how it works.
Yeah, that's going to be a no for me, dog. You can have that spot.
Welcome to yet another Geek Show where we talk down on your dreams and tell you what you can't do.
Well, we're not telling you can't do it. At least I'm not, you fucking dick. No,
I'm telling you can't be the next Buddy Rich. Or what was the other one they were fixated on?
Charlie Parker.
Yeah, you can't be the next Charlie Parker.
Although, there's
you could become as skilled as him, but you're not going to get his reputation.
No.
In 2019.
Yeah, definitely not. And man, that's kind of sad if you think about it, because back then it was, you got to hear this dude, you got to hear this, you got to hear that. And now it's like, have you heard of this guy? No. And you really don't want to because there's so much oversaturation in the market. And granted, yeah, we're part of that problem. And I don't know what the way to fix it is.
I don't know. I think it just doesn't really need fixed. It makes music less of a competition, and I think it's for the better. I love the bit where one of Andrew's brothers says something like, how do they know who the best musician or drummer or something is? Isn't it all subjective?
Yeah.
And he's like, no. Just a real quick positive no.
Right.
You can objectively measure this, which isn't true, but it's an entertaining look into his head anyway.
If you're a very theatrical musician, then yeah, you can agree with him.
It makes you wonder how much he actually cares about music as compared to just being the best at something.
Right. Because if you notice it, he's not composing.
Sure.
He's just playing.
He's not composing, which I don't think is unusual for a jazz musician. That's why they have a term like jazz standard and we don't have a term like metal standard.
Right.
But he also doesn't listen to music recreationally at all.
Right.
He only puts on music to microanalyze the drumming.
Right. So
it's
like
work every time he listens.
So even then, if you think about it, like for him to become the best, what is he going to be the best at? Just being a studio drummer? You know what I mean? Like for those of you who don't know what a studio drummer is, that's just somebody that literally works in a studio and plays for bands when their drummer or other instrument person is not there, or they need somebody to fill a spot in for an orchestra.
Hired gun.
Yeah, it's a hired gun. It's a merc. It's a merc.
Yeah.
But honestly, if you think about it, I don't know if he could really like. There's no question that he could be the best drummer, quote unquote. But even then, with the coming back to the question of isn't that all subjective? Think about it. Like it doesn't like. It depends on what you're looking at. Are you looking at the best composing drummer? Are you looking at the best practical playing drummer? Or are you looking at the best rhythmic articulation? There's so many different things to look at.
I wonder if you and I have always kind of had the philosophy of dividing musical skill into technical skill, the playing, and into creative skill, the composition. And I wonder if this character, I don't know, maybe if miraculously any jazz musicians end up listening to this, maybe they can chime in, but maybe a lot of jazz musicians don't see it that way and divide it because, again, I'm going to expose my lack of jazz knowledge, but I think even when they are largely cover bands playing these standards, I think they still leave a lot of room for improvisation. Or at least La La Land taught us that jazz is all about improv and feeding off each other. So maybe he's not seeing the difference for that reason. He's going to play the standard and he's going to nail it. He's also going to get his drum solo and he's going to improv that and nail it too. And that is what he does in the final scene of the movie. is alternate between nailing something that was already written and nailing something improvised.
Right. Man, I don't know. Maybe if anybody's watching this and has any ties to Adam Neely. Sorry.
Adam Neely did not love this movie. He has a video on it.
Oh, he does?
If I recall, it's been a long time. He considered it an enjoyable movie, but not an accurate one. He doesn't consider it faithful to his experience in music school.
Well,
and that
okay,
frustrates him. So,
but then again,
he would describe it as grossly inaccurate.
Well, like we touched base on, like if this is a vision of somebody else's, looking at an older time in a modern era, it would totally make sense. I don't know if our new best friend Daniel Tidwell has an opinion on it, but he's not here right now. So
I mean, Damien Chazelle is somebody with a lot of nostalgia for times that are older than him. La La Land is
absolutely
simultaneously a love for the history of jazz and the history of
neon
cinema.
Lights.
And he's doing things in that movie that feel a little anachronistic. They feel out of time. It doesn't feel like this should be happening in the year it takes place in. And so I guess maybe that kind of starts here, where this is a particular goal and attitude that doesn't really exist today, but whatever. He wants his movies to take place today, and he has nostalgia for that time in the heydays of jazz, where I guess jazz drummers were competing to be the greatest.
Right. Okay. I could see that.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I don't need that much realism. There's a threshold to the absurdity, given that this isn't exactly a superhero movie.
Right. And there's no ghosts and
yeah.
And
I think it's well within my threshold.
Yeah. Okay. I want to talk about the last act of the movie where he gets kicked out of the band. Andrew, what is it? Neiman? Yeah.
I feel like they pronounced it Neiman and Naaman in the movie and kept switching. I feel like I heard both.
Is it just me, or is it really challenging to not say Nimoy? But I almost called him Leonard Neiman.
That's it. That's the one.
Okay, so Fletcher takes Andrew out of the band after the car crash because he shows up and tries to play and ruins the show. And Andrew attacks Fletcher, and then a school counselor or a lawyer comes in play and asks him about that guy that we talked about earlier. What was his name? Sean something or other. If he knew about him, because we under the understanding of having him being dead under a car crash, but in fact it was he killed himself. He hung himself after having severe anxiety and depression after being in interactions with Fletcher. And basically we get like a weird scene that I can't quite understand, where it's kind of like a montage-y thing where you're watching Andrew reflect on a video of him as a child playing drums and contemplating whether or not to rat out Fletcher. And I don't understand the correlation between those two scenes. You know what I'm talking about? Because like he's sitting there watching himself as a kid. Is he just forgotten his entire reason for wanting to do this just because of Fletcher?
I guess we're just seeing that Andrew is withstanding the torment and seeing through it and fighting through it and respecting him and understanding what he's trying to do despite all his assholeness. And it's the difference between him and this kid that killed himself was that, maybe that's not a great message, but it's just, to me, it's just a side by side. Like, it's not a given that you are going to make it through this torment. This guy's a fighter. And he respects the person doing this to him because he understands what he's trying to do to him.
Okay. Basically, Fletcher gets fired. I'm assuming some months have passed because it said summer at the bottom of the screen. So I'm assuming it's they're out of school because he left and apparently got his own apartment and is trying to live life without the goal. From what I can imagine, he tears all of his shit down, throws it away, puts his drums in a closet, never to be touched for 3 months. But he meets Fletcher at a jazz bar where, my God, I never thought I'd see this guy ever relax. And in this scene,
you wouldn't think he played such relaxing piano music.
No, I just don't think he could ever make a face of relief ever.
Yeah,
just like, God, I figured that guy would scream at a shower for not fucking, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's too cold. And he like throws a chair at it.
Not my temperature.
Not my temperature. Hurls a fucking chair or a cymbal at it. Oh man! And then he yells at somebody to get all the debris out of there when there's no one around. Like, somebody get this shit out of my bathroom. Anyways, they kind of reconnect, and he offers him a gig.
Mm-hmm.
And
then sabotages him like an asshole.
Right. But you get some sort of explanation as to what he's doing, and that dialogue there was phenomenal. You know, talking about like he won't apologize for the things he did because he was trying to push people beyond what they were asked of. You kind of gain a respect for him, even though like he is an asshole. He's a likable asshole, but he's still an asshole. And then they go to the show, and he gives them not at the right sheet music for the show, and he's like, I knew it was you, and like. You get some of the best like mouth like fuck yous across the stage. Like, it's so good.
The bit where he gets a little bit too close to one of Andrew's cymbals and he hits it real hard at his face. Like, that kind of thing where they can shit talk each other without dialogue, get in each other's faces in the middle of this performance.
And what's amazing
and that shot's
to me,
directed in such a way that you could tell, that cymbal didn't actually belong there in that part of the song. He just felt the need to hit it because he got too close.
Right, exactly. And the one thing I will say that's how do I want to say this? There's something really cool about the characters' interactions here because they hate each other, but they love what they do more than they hate each other to ruin the show.
They have a weird respect for each other.
Yeah. Especially at the end with the songs The Caravan and Whiplash.
Yeah.
Like it was more Andrew became the director. And
he got kind of fuck you, I'm gonna do what you want or what I want. I'll cue you in.
Yeah, and he
asshole.
He's like, I'll cue you in, and then he does, and they both
when he said I'll cue you to Fletcher, my wife misheard him and thought he said I'll kill you, and she lost her shit. She thought it was hysterical. Just in the middle of this kick-ass drum performance.
You see the hatred kind of just like sort of wash away on J.K. Simmons' face. And then he's like, oh, fuck, this is working. Wait a minute. And like,
you can see him realize that he did it. His goal succeeded.
Yeah, it's a really interesting play to see, like, they hate each other, but then they also seemed like best friends right there. You know what I mean? Like, they both needed each other to succeed. And I don't know, there's something so perplexing about that. You know what I mean?
It's still touching. You know that this relationship is horrible and toxic.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's all the bad things about it are just kind of an absurd means to a touching end of him achieving this goal. Because there's a certain amount of watching a movie compared to the real world. Like, you give the characters more flexibility to do wrong. We give characters more forgiveness than real people, if that makes sense.
No, that's pretty accurate, actually.
Like, if we want to never be done talking about Game of Thrones, at some point you learn to like Jaime Lannister. In the real world, you will never learn to like and forgive someone who pushes a kid out a window. It's not gonna happen.
Right.
But in the magic of film, I'll allow it. And so here, by the end of it, you still to some extent like Fletcher,
right?
Even though he pushed a kid into suicide, which isn't something you would forgive in the real world, but here,
And even
Yeah.
then, like with all the damage done, and like I still have the same emotion towards the end of the movie the second time, where it's not bittersweet. You know what I mean? It's not like a, oh, that's sad, but it's okay. It's a, I hate this guy, but this is awesome that this happened.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
it's a weird reaction, and I
Fletcher
don't
is
know.
more likable than Andrew. And then you're like, why am I rooting for this kid? He's an unbearable douchebag too, to a lesser extent. And then you're like, all right, I guess he's giving the drum performance of a lifetime, and I'm stoked for it, and I'm happy for him, even though I don't really like him.
Yeah.
Something still feels good about watching someone achieve a goal like that, especially an absurd, ridiculous, unrealistic goal like that.
Right, absolutely. Like in Sekiro.
Jesus. One day, Dalton will beat Sekiro, and everyone will be so proud of him acquiring average video game skills.
Not my fucking death blow. Anyways, man,
If any last comments at all, I'm pretty much good.
I'm kind of the same. I said it earlier. If you haven't watched this movie and you still will listen to it anyway, go watch the damn movie and you'll see what we mean. Go to our Discord and bitch at us there. In fact, mail me a letter to 12341234 www.notmyfuckingtempo.gov. Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Goodbye.